So, of all the lands in Disneyland, Tomorrowland is definitely one of them. Welcome to welcome to Disneyland, and welcome to Tomorrowland. Welcome to Tomorrowland. Look at that timing. All right, so Tomorrowland gets a bad rap from some people. Maybe me as well. But ultimately, Tomorrowland's one of the most iconic lands in Disneyland, right? It's, you walk right into the hub and you look around, you see the Astro-Orbitor right there in the front, and there's something just kind of cool aesthetically about it. So I had a hard time putting together a video for Tomorrowland. Obviously, a lot of It's a lot of content about stuff that used to be there and isn't there anymore. So it's hard to point a camera at something and say, hey, this used to be that. But it also is cool to hear a little bit of the history, so we will touch on that a little bit. So the Astro-Orbitor is, you notice it has got a different color scheme here. So in the renovation that they did back in 1998 for Tomorrowland was more inspired by Disneyland Paris and the whole Jules Verne sort of theme that they had going on there. So a lot more like kind of gold and blues and those kind of colors. They originally had out front a bunch of space-themed rocks that were painted gold as well. A lot of people lovingly called them the French fry rocks, and unfortunately they're not here today. It's a lot more open, but they are going to renovate it once again. So hopefully by 2024 we'll have yet another entrance into Tomorrowland. All right. Another chapter of tales of what used to be around in Tomorrowland. They used to have the Monsanto House of Tomorrow. The House of Tomorrow was a pretty cool, futuristic house, kind of a, not the geodesic dome, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. It was a round house. Let's just call it that. It's a round house.
You think anybody wants a round house?
And featured such innovative attractions like remote controls and wall-mounted TVs and other things that we've come to take for granted nowadays. Eventually, it just became outdated, and they need to knock this down. They initially planned for a day of demo and hit it with the Wrecking Ball, and not much happened. They proceeded to spend the next 2 weeks tearing that apart with crowbars and undoing bolts and really dismantling it piece by piece. I guess the thing was built like a tank. So Monsanto's House of Tomorrow used to stand right around where what is now Pixie Hollow. But the thing was such a tank that the foundation is still here today, even after its demolition. So as you approach Pixie Hollow, you can see little painted green foundation structures that are remnants of what used to be that. Arguably one of Disneyland's most famous rides ever constructed, Space Mountain. Space Mountain's actually begins 15 feet below, I don't know, what do you call it, sea level, below the grade, whatever it is. They started building it 15 feet down. Some people say that it was just so it wouldn't dwarf the other mountains around it, probably most notably the Matterhorn. I don't know if that's true or if maybe it was more for engineering purposes, but regardless, it's 15 feet down, so there you go. The Space Mountain at Disneyland is actually known as Space Station 77. That was a trend started by Space Mountain over in Florida, which is called Spaceport 75. So that was built in 1975. The Disneyland version built in 1977, hence the names. Space Mountain has a number of popular overlays, most notably probably Hyperspace Mountain, but not many people remember that there was actually a Rockin' Space Mountain overlay with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I guess they played Higher Ground, which I think is an ironic choice to talk about higher ground in space, but nonetheless. All right, so beyond those basic facts, you know, Space Mountain just has way too much to cover without actually going inside and covering all the details. So we'll do a whole separate video on Space Mountain itself. So if you want to see that, you know, like and subscribe and all the, you know, that little YouTuber babble. It feels so weird every time I say stuff like that. So Walt was saying that, you know, when they were devising Disneyland, that they found that guests responded to Wienies, which was an analogy really for, he had a couple of dogs, and so when he wanted to leave the dogs around, the house. You know, he got little sausages, little weenies, and kind of used that to lure them to the house to get them to where he wanted to go. Found out, you know, surprisingly, people aren't much different. Obviously, the big weenie in the park is the castle. You walk through the gates, everybody sees the castle, you naturally just sort of migrate towards it. For Tomorrowland, it was originally the big rocket.
And the big rocket, it has a name. It's called the Moonliner. It was sponsored by TWA, and it wasn't actually a ride or an attraction. It was just meant to act as a centerpiece for the land. It was the tallest thing in Disneyland. It was 76 feet high, which was 8 feet higher than Sleeping Beauty's castle.
And so this model outside of Pizza Planet, very similar in look and style after the TWA Moonliner. And that was originally constructed by John Hench with the help of Werner von Braun. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Werner von Braun. And he was Werner. He was a literal Nazi scientist, and he helped develop the ballistic V2 rocket that the Moonliner is modeled after. And that will be our only Nazi-based fact for today's video. All right, building behind me, I feel very conflicted about. You know, it has a lot of history. It's you know, was once Carousel Progress, once Innovations, once America Sings, a lot of different attractions. Nowadays, it largely sits empty. And so when you hear things like, you know, yeah, Disneyland's running out of places to build and new attractions, you know, you got a huge footprint right there that's sitting unused. Right now, I think you can go see Darth Vader in there if you're either a Chase card member or during certain other meeting times. All right, so obviously Disneyland has tons of thrill rides. You know, sometimes none of them can compete with the time-honored tradition of just spinning around in a circle, right? Astro-Orbiter welcomes you right as you come into Tomorrowland, and that is the current iteration of the sort of kind of Dumbo type ride where you spin around and get a little bit dizzy. In addition to being the ride at Disneyland that makes you feel the most overweight and out of shape when climbing into the tiny capsules, it has a lot of histories. The Astro-Orbiter is really like the third iteration of that ride. Originally, it was called the Astrojets, of course, and then the sponsor at the time was United Airlines. But United felt that Astrojets was actually advertisement for American Airlines Astrojet service at the time, and they just changed it to the Tomorrowland Jets. So just kind of like Dumbo ground level, circular, I don't know what you call that, carousel of jets. You spin around, you have a good time. They then renovated in, I don't know, what was it, 1967 something? If I get the date wrong, I'll just cut this out. They moved the Astrojets up 4 stories in the air, and they call them the Rocket Jets, which is on top of this building of the People Mover station that they had there. So the Rocket Jets would spin around, and you were much higher up. You could see a lot of the park, and of course, I was not born then.
Now, where were we? Oh, yeah. The important thing was that I had an onion on my belt.
But I bet it was pretty cool. So after they shut down the Rocket Jets, they had that whole structure there, and that structure is actually still the structure of the Rocket Jets as they spun around. Now they've converted it into the Observatron. What's an Observatron, you ask? Great question. I had to look that up myself. Because honestly, I don't know what an Observatron is. You observe it, and nowadays that is pretty much all you do. It used to spin around and light up and play songs. I think it was a series like 4 kind of triumphant futuristic songs. I'll put them like right here when I look them up. Yeah, nowadays it just sits there. So again, you know, where something cool used to be, now it kind of sits there. A little bit of an analogy for Tomorrowland in some respects, but hey, it's a cool little piece of history. So the large granite ball that's in the middle of Tomorrowland, that weighs 6 tons allegedly, and if you took it off of its base, the water pressure underneath would shoot water 150 feet in the air. I haven't tried it personally, so it's just one of those facts you kind of have to go with, and you can't prove me wrong, so there you go. One of the most beloved rides in all of Tomorrowland was the People Mover, of course. Unfortunately, they shut that down as they thought it needed a little bit more renovation and pep and something more exciting. So they put in the rocket rods. And unfortunately, the rocket rods were, you know, they were popular for a little bit, but they went a lot faster than the original People Mover, and they ended up having to slow down at the turns. They still ended up wrecking some of the rails, rumor has it. Now the whole track is all messed up and really can't be used again without millions of dollars in repairs, so who knows if they'll actually bring it back sometime in the future. But the Rocket Rod Station still sits here today, as well as, of course, the tracks that go all through Tomorrowland. So even though, you know, the People Mover was once everybody's favorite attraction back in the day, the structure still provides everybody's favorite attraction today, which is shade in a land filled with concrete and metal. You like noise, you like noxious fumes, you like going probably about 5 miles an hour? Well, I'll tell you what, Autopia is the ride for you. I give Autopia a lot of guff because Autopia really, it takes up a massive footprint in Disneyland, and you know, hey, we just closed Splash Mountain, so if nothing's sacred anymore, I think one day the go-karts as a symbol of the future might have seen their heyday. But there's cool things about Autopia, right? You know, the track that actually is in the middle of the freeway there, that wasn't actually put in until 1963. So there was a day where you could just kind of roam all the way around and kind of bump into whatever you please there. And as a, you know, remnant of us not having to have rails back in the day, they used to have cast members towards the end who would stand on a concrete block and direct traffic so that you couldn't run them over when they weren't looking. So yeah, next time you're coming in the home stretch in Autopia, look for that concrete block. And because who doesn't want to look at a concrete block? I mean, if you're not, I don't know what you're doing at Disneyland if you're not here to look at an old concrete block. And there was actually 4 types of Autopias over the year. At one point, there was 3 at one given time. Probably the most famous was Midget Autopia, which is not a name we should use anymore, and probably one of the reasons it went away. But there's still an homage to it as you go along the current Autopia track. So yeah, they had another version that spanned the area between Tomorrowland and Fantasyland. So Autopia wasn't always just a Tomorrowland attraction. Once you get done with Autopia and you're coming down the line, don't forget to get your driver's license, $8. Or you can ask the cast members if they have free driver's license to hand out. We've gotten mixed reviews on that. Some people are like, no, we don't do that at all. And some people are like, yeah, we have them, but we just ran out or whatever. In either case, we've never actually gotten one. So if you have, let me know. Leave a comment below and tell us your story, how you finagled one of those.
One way to pass the time in Autopia's queue is trying to decipher all of the license plates. Each of them have references to Disneyland. Some of them are easy, like, you know, Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. Some of them are a bit more obscure references to dates and Imagineers and apparently AOL Instant Messenger acronyms. The Disneyland Route 55 freeway sign is a reference to 1955, the year that Disneyland opened.
Disneyland Monorail is closed for today, and we'll do a whole other video specifically on the monorail. So like, subscribe, etc., etc. You know, you get the drift if you want to see that in the future. So one thing that you'll notice as you go towards the end of Tomorrowland and you pass Autopia is, or actually you won't notice much. You see how the background is just, you know, you don't see hotels and you don't see Harbor Boulevard in the background there, which a lot of it is right on the other side. The reason for that is the berm that's built around Disneyland. It's an elevated hill built all around Disneyland when it was first constructed, and it really helps keep the sight lines inside so that you never really think about the outside world, which is kind of one of the main benefits about Disneyland most of the time. And where do you get all that dirt to create a berm all the way around Disneyland? When they were digging out the area around Tom Sawyer Island to create the Rivers of America, they just relocated all the dirt around the outside and bam, no more sight lines. Right. Finding Nemo's Submarine Voyage. Yeah, there we go, over the umbrellas. So yeah, now it's Finding Nemo's Submarine Voyage. A lot of people thought that it was actually originally a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea attraction, which in Disney World it was.
Making too much noise all the time?
A lot of people thought that the original Submarine Voyage attraction was a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea themed attraction.
You're so stupid!
It was not. It was in Disney World, but never in Disneyland. It was always just kind of a generic under the sea adventure. But they did have an attraction for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea back where the extended queue is for Star Tours. And in there they had just a bunch of memorabilia and stuff like that. And they actually had the organ from the Nautilus. And the organ is actually still here today in the Haunted Mansion with Pepper's Ghost Illusion and all that good stuff. It's right at the end, still being played to this very day.
The original submarine voyage was modeled after the USS Nautilus, which was the world's first nuclear submarine. In 1959, they opened the ride with the christening of the Nautilus, and there's 8 submarines in total that make up the ride. All of them have had their names changed over the years, all of them, that is, except for the Nautilus. By the way, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I never even knew what Nautilus meant. I thought it was just a cool nautical sounding term, but apparently it's the name of these weird looking creatures right here. Okay, so for those of you keeping track at home, Jules Verne wrote 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which spawned at the Disney adaptation in movie form. The ship in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is called the Nautilus, piloted by Captain Nemo. Then the world's first nuclear submarine was also called the Nautilus because it was inspired by the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ship. So then in 1959, Disneyland decides they want to mess with everyone and make a submarine-based attraction, but not base it on the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea movie they just made. They want to base it on the USS Nautilus. But then Disney decided it wasn't confusing enough, so let's just go ahead and build a Walt Disney World attraction based on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, just to confuse people even more. But years down the road, we're just going to go ahead and change the theme for all of them over to Finding Nemo. Nemo is known for the Nautilus, but we're going to make him a clownfish. Oh, and by the way, throw Nemo's organ into the Haunted Mansion.
Another fun fact about the Submarine Voyage, it used to have real live mermaids that would sit out on the rocks in the middle of the ocean there, and they would wave to the guests and jump in the water and swim and do all sorts of cool, fun stuff. They did not last long, unfortunately. So the mermaids, as you can imagine, sitting in the hot California sun, needed a ton of sunscreen, they got sunburns, and also to keep the water that clear behind you, you need tons and tons of chlorine. So that's super chlorinated water. So they would get, get mermaids with their hair turning blonde, turning green, I think maybe some nasty chemical burns or something like that. Unfortunately, it's just not a hospitable environment to spend an 8-hour shift or so. By the way, I forgot to mention, I'm not by the mermaids anymore, but there's a whole cool documentary about the history of the mermaids in the Submarine Voyage attraction. Go ahead and check it out. It's not even my video, but it's cool, so I'll put a link in the description below. So the original Submarine Voyage attraction used to have a sea monster. It used to have mermaids. Those are no longer there. As you wrap up Finding Nemo's voyage.
We better take you out before we have a run-in with the sea, sir. We've already counted the blue lane. We are servicing and approaching our home port.
Today's fun fact about utility infrastructure comes from Mrs. Happy Shannon.
Hi, hello friends. You're looking at the TL59 pipe, Tomorrowland 1959 when Disney opened. This pipe also made a cameo in Finding Nemo? Finding Dory. Even better. So if you happen to be in line, look up, you will see the pipe, and now you know what it is.
Yeah, so there is a myth that, this lighting's horrible. There's a myth that all of the plants in Tomorrowland are edible. It's like a vision of the future, right? The sustainable economy, everything like that. That's false.
So the myth is busted.
Remember how I told you that churros were too expensive? You could just kind of eat the plants?
Yeah.
That was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they taste great.
All right, well, some of them. Trial and error, right? Nowadays, the area that's taken up by the Matterhorn and these submarines actually used to be the Viewliner, which was, Walt's infatuation with trains. He asked to create a futuristic version of a train, which ended up not being much more than I think it was like a 58 Oldsmobile or something like that. I think it had a Corvette V8 engine as well. And it looked futuristic for its time, but eventually it got phased out. They went and opted to build the monorail, which was probably a much better choice in retrospect. But you can still see a reference to the Viewliner's heyday over at Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. And if you exit the gift shop and you look right above you, you'll see a little rendition of the Viewliner and what it looked like back in the day. All right, so we're in what I think most people would really now consider Fantasyland more so than Tomorrowland, but we're over here because under the rail of the monorail here is an old station for what used to be the Motorboat Cruise, which was an attraction where guests used to be able to board their own personal boats and see the scenery, et cetera, et cetera. When they constructed Toontown, a lot of the budget went to that, and the motorboats were shut down. So its loading platform is now just a what's called Fantasia Gardens, and you could go over here to Edelweiss Snacks, grab a nice shady spot, and honestly, best place to see ducks in the whole park. If you're a duck fan, it's a place for you. Yeah, there they are. Never fails. Ducks galore. If you're not interested in the best view, it's also kind of one of the secret, not secret. It's kind of one of the low-key best places to see the Magic Happens parade. All those floats just go right in front of Small World, and everybody's crowded around the street, but you can see that you can sit on the shady dock there, get a nice view, and still see most of the parade from a distance. So I don't do this often, but one of the cooler trivia things about Tomorrowland is not in Disneyland, but in Disney World. They have the Flight of the Navigator spaceship that has actually been repurposed, and now that's over like a churro cart or something, and painted red over. I'll see if I can pop a picture right there. So if you're in Disney World, feel free to check that out. If you're a fan of Mary Blair, and a lot of people are, and if you're not familiar with Mary Blair, think, it's Small World, that style of art. She actually had a couple of large murals that was in Tomorrowland originally. So what was over the Buzz Lightyear queue, that is now more of a transportation-themed mural, was originally like a communication space, like Children of the World sharing a bunch of communication messages. And then over what is the Star Tours building was another mural based on, I think it was like renewable energy or something like that. So when they did the renovations, one of these murals I think was largely destroyed, and then the other one is probably not in great shape, but it's at least under the facade somewhere and maybe preserved. So maybe it's restorable, maybe it's not. Yeah, so if you're a fan of Mary Blair, maybe it makes you feel better knowing that her artwork is probably preserved under the facades that you see here today. What used to be in Tomorrowland, Chapter 23, Star Tours. Before it was Star Tours, was Adventures into Inner Space. You come face to face with a microscope when you're shrunk to the size of the atom in the beginning of Adventures Through Inner Space, and if you get the right beginning in Star Tours, you actually get a little cameo of that microscope as you exit the Death Star, I believe, in one of those. Again, I'll see if I can dig up a snapshot of it. I doubt I can get it live, but it looks like this from a source to be credited later.
I shot a whole bunch of stuff of the Star Tours queue because it's kind of low-key one of the best queues for little hidden references. But this video is already over 20 minutes long, so I'm just going to finish with a few of my favorites. Droids that you see when you enter the second stage of the queue here are known as Goose droids, and the reason for that is they used to be geese in America Sings. They took those animatronics and stripped the exteriors off of them, and now they're little luggage-handling android robots. And speaking of luggage, there's actually not as much luggage down there as it appears. If you look closely, there's just a bunch of mirrors providing the illusion of a large expanse of luggage below the robots. And finally, the Goose droid that meets us right before we board our flight is actually a voice actor from another flight-based attraction in Disneyland. It's pretty heavily filtered, but if you pay close attention, I think you might notice similarities.
My name is Patrick, and I'll be your chief flight attendant today.
My name is G214. That's short for G214T4557998DWP403SG. That's just my first name. I'd tell you my last name, but I don't want to hold up the phone.
We are going to be moving along. We shared a lot with you today, so if you made it all the way through,
Nice work, pal.
All right, so that's Tomorrowland. A lot of cool stuff that used to be, and you know, there's a lot of cool stuff that still is. I won't be too hard on it. If there's anything we missed, feel free to comment below, and maybe we'll make a second video. My theory with these is to kind of make a video of kind of introductory facts for each land, and then another video that's really a deep dive and going hardcore into a lot of other interesting facts that are really hard to find. So hopefully that'll be the next one around. And you know, given that I'm producing about one of these every 90 days thus far, so look forward to that in 2026 sometime or so. Just kidding. Now I'll pick up the pace here. I'll try to start cranking these out on a more regular basis. Some of you guys have said some real nice things in the comments. So even though I kind of have these periods where I don't create much, it's always nice to hear every little notification I get of a new subscriber, every time someone says something nice. It's inspiring and helps me to get off my butt into it. Honestly, this is the fun part of capturing everything. It's editing that's a major pain in the butt. Yeah, thanks for the motivation to edit, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with me here and letting me share a few fun facts and interesting tidbits. And I'll see y'all when we're on to the next land, which is probably Frontierland, coming in another week or 2 or 3 or 4. We'll see how long it actually takes me to get off my butt and edit that. Appreciate you all. Take care of yourself. Take care of everybody else around you. And we'll see you in the parks. Thanks. Have a good one. Bye. Yeah, good little place to cool down. And one of the most beloved rides in the history of Tomorrowland was the People Mover, of course. People. It's nice when you can catch dumb jokes before they even come out of your mouth, as opposed to after you hit publish. Remember how I said, like, no.
You said no.
No!